Okay, so let's go ahead and start the last section of notes for the unit. So we're looking at radical equations. So I have the steps listed in the beginning here. So we're going to isolate the root symbol or fractional exponent, depending on what form it's in. And then we're going to raise both sides to the reciprocal exponent. We're then going to get x alone. So it says isolate the variable. That means get x alone. And then we're going to check for extraneous solutions, which means plug it back in and make sure that they all work. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. So when we say isolate the square root symbol, this is what we need to get alone. So when you see that, that means we need to go ahead and add 5 to both sides. So that's going to bring down square root 3x plus 4. 5 plus 3 is 8. And now we're going to go ahead and undo the square root. So to undo the square root, we have to square both sides. So that's how you always undo a square root. And that's going to get me 3x plus 4 equals 8 squared, which is 64. And then you're just going to solve from there. You're going to subtract 4 from each side. So I'm going to get 60, divide by 3, and x is 20. We're going to check for extraneous solutions. That means extra solutions. Maybe it doesn't work. So you're going to plug 20 back in. This is a pretty quick process because you have a calculator. So please use it, save time. 3 times 20 plus 4 all needs to be in your square root. And then out of the square root, so make sure you arrow out of it, subtract 5, and you do get 3. So you have to check because you're going to see sometimes that the solution, there's an extra run where it does not work and you're going to have to cross it off. You're going to have to show that as part of your work. Okay. Let's take a look at number 2. So here's one with a fractional exponent. So same idea here. You want to isolate the fractional exponent. So we have to move over the plus 4 by subtracting 4 to both sides. So that's going to leave me with 3x minus 1 to the 1/3. And then 2 minus 4 is negative 2. My fraction looks a little strange. I'm going to fix that. So that should be a 1/3. Okay, now to undo the fraction 1/3, we have to go ahead and raise it to the 3/1. And that's going to be the reciprocal exponent because 1/3 times 3/1 is just 1. So these cancel here. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. 3/1 is just 3. So I'm just going to put a 3 there. It makes it easier to look at. So I'm left with just 3x minus 1. Negative 2 to the 3rd power is negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. So 3 negatives make a negative. And then from there, I'm just going to continue to solve. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. That gets me negative 7. I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and that gets me negative 7/3. Once again, you have to plug this into your calculator to check your answer. So 3 times negative 7/3 minus 1. I don't know, I have that in the beginning. Oh, wait. 2 sets of parentheses because I plug in the negative 7/3 and then the one that they have. Raised to the 1/3 plus 4. You're going to hit enter in your calculator and it should be 2. So that solution does work. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the next example. So here we have a square root. So same idea. You have to start by isolating the square root. So there's a 2 there. Since the 2 is connected by multiplying, you have to divide the 2. So we end up getting x over 2 equals the square root 3x minus 9. So to undo a square root, the inverse operation is squaring. So you have to go ahead and square both sides of the equation. So what happens to the left side when you square it? X squared is x squared. And then 2 squared is 4, because remember you have to square everything inside of the parentheses. So you get x squared over 4. And on the other side, we're left with just 3x minus 9. Now, we talked about this before, is how to get rid of a fraction in the denominator. You multiply by the LCD, the least common denominator, and the only LCD here is 4. So you're going to multiply everything by 4. So every single term, the first one over here, the second one, and the third one, it's all going to be multiplied by 4. On the left side, you get 4x squared over 4, so the 4's would cancel. So you're left with just an x squared. You've got 3x times 4, that gives you a 12x. And then you have 9 times 4, and that gives you minus 36. And then from there, you're just going to continue to solve. It's a quadratic. We just spent a lot of time solving quadratics. Move everything to one side. So you want a positive x squared. So I'm going to subtract 12x, and I'm going to add 36. And now I have everything on one side equal to 0 because I want to use the zero product property, which means I have to factor it. This one is a quadratic. It's different than the others. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 36 and add to negative 12. Which is negative 6 and negative 6. So simply I can write that as two factors. Or you can write that as x minus 6 squared, since it's the same factor, it doesn't matter. Either way, you set each factor equal to 0. And since the factors are the same, you don't have to write 6 twice. It's the same thing. You can just write it once. And then obviously you're going to go ahead and check your answer again. So I'm going to write the check work one last time. But after that, I am not going to write it every time, except for when I show you that it doesn't work. So if we go back and put it in the original problem, I'm going to say 2 square root 3 times 6 minus 9. And when I plug that in, I get 6, which again, it says it should equal x, and x is 6. So it does work. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. This one's a little bit different as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this with you. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is undo the square root. So to undo the square root, because look at it's isolated on the left side. So first, I know I've been highlighting this, but notice that this is already isolated on the left side. So the very first step we're going to do is square both sides to undo the square root. So that's going to leave me with x squared minus x minus 6. The right side is a FOIL problem here. You need to go ahead and FOIL out x plus 5 times x plus 5. So that's going to end up getting me x squared. The 5x and the 5x will make 10x in the middle, plus 25. It's a quadratic again, so I need to move everything on one side. But notice when you subtract x squareds, the x squareds are going to zero each other out when you subtract them. So really what we have is negative x minus 6 equals 10x plus 25. And then you're just going to continue to solve. I'm going to add x to both sides. So that's going to give me 11x. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 25 from both sides. So that gets me negative 31 equals 11x. I'm going to divide both sides by 11. And x is negative 31 over 11. I'm going to go ahead and plug that answer back in my calculator. Again, you do not need to do this by hand. You're going to go ahead and check it by plugging in. And it does work. You're going to have to plug it into the left side and plug it into the right side, and they're both going to equal the same number. We will get to examples where it doesn't work. Don't worry. All right, let's look at the next one. Same idea here. It's already isolated. So notice this part is already isolated. So you're going to work right into getting rid of the exponent to the 1/2. So since it's to the 1/2, you're going to raise it to the 2 over 1. You're going to do the reciprocal. So you can either put 2 over 1 or just 2, whatever works for you. On the right side, I'm just going to put a squared, okay, just a 2. So the left side, I'm left with just x squared plus 32 equals 6 squared, which is 36. And then from there, you're just going to go ahead and solve it. Multiple ways to solve it. You can either get it one side and factor, or you can use the square root method, which means isolate the x squared. So subtract 32 to both sides. That gets you 4. And then you would square root both sides to get the x alone. But when you square root both sides, you need to make sure you put the plus minus sign. If you do not, that would be incorrect. So you have 2 answers to check. So when you check this one, you need to make sure that you check a positive 2. Which does equal 6. And you also have to plug in a negative 2, which will equal 6. And they both work because 2 squared is 4, and negative 2, when you square it, is still a positive 4. So they end up being the same thing. All right, so let's keep moving on here. I'm going to go ahead and show you this one as well. So first thing again, we need to isolate the square root. So we need to isolate this part. It is not alone. The 2 is in the way. It's connected by multiplying. So you're going to divide the 2. So first step is divide the 2, which is going to leave me with x over 2 equals the square root negative x minus 1. So at first, this kind of looks like our other problem, but there is a difference with this one. The next step, hopefully you know what to do. You're going to go ahead and square both sides because we want to get rid of the square root. So that's going to end up giving us x squared over 4, because remember you have to square both parts, equals negative x minus 1. Once again, I would get rid of the fraction by multiplying by the LCD, which is 4. So I would multiply each part. There happens to be 3 parts again. So the part all the way on the left is 4x squared over 4. So the 4's cancel and you have just the x squared. The next one, negative x times 4 is negative 4x. And then the next one is negative 1 times 4, which is negative 4. It's a quadratic, so we want to get everything on one side here. So I'm going to go ahead and add 4x and add 4 so I can have it equal to 0. So I can use the zero product property and factor this. So 2 numbers that multiply to 4 and add to 4 is 2 and 2. So I can break that up into x plus 2 times x plus 2, or you can simply write that as x plus 2 squared. So I'm going to set that factor equal to 0. X plus 2 equals 0, and x is negative 2. Now, really, you should have been able to get to this entire part by yourself because we did a problem like this in number 4 right above. But the difference is when we check this answer, something else comes up, okay? So the checking is really, really important here in this and the next problem. We're going to plug in negative 2 into the problem. So I'm going to say 2 square root. Again, I'm plugging in negative 2. Well, first there's a minus sign or a negative sign, so it has a negative. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug in my negative 2. And then it's minus 1. So that's what it looks like. So you can use your calculator to go ahead and do this. So 2 square root negative parentheses negative 2 minus 1 all underneath the square root. And when I type that in, I get a positive 2. But I'm not supposed to get a positive 2 because it's supposed to equal x. It's supposed to be negative 2 because our x is negative 2. So x equals negative 2 is not a solution because when I typed it in, I got 2 and I should get negative 2. So this answer is thrown out and there's no answers left. So my final answer is going to be no solution. So for number 7, it's going to be the same idea. You need to check both answers. You should get 2 answers in number 7. Check them both, and only one of them will actually be your answer. So I'm going to have you go ahead and see if you can do this one. So I'm going to say stop. Try this one on your own. Okay, now that we're taking a look at it together, so we're going to go ahead and square both sides because we already have it isolated. So that's going to leave me with 4x plus 3 equals 4x squared. 2x squared means 2x times 2x. That's 4x squared. I'm going to move everything on one side. I want the 4x squared to be positive, so I'm going to move everything from the left to the right. So I'm going to subtract 4x and subtract 3. Now I'm going to factor it. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 4 times negative 3 is negative 12 and adds to negative 4. So that would end up being negative 6x and positive 2x will work. Then I bring down the minus 3 and I bring down the 4x squared. And then I'm going to go ahead and group my first two, group my last two, take the GCF. Remember how I said this is so important that you can do this, it's going to show up everywhere? I literally mean that. You have to be able to split the middle. So I'm left with a 2x minus 3 when I do the GCF. The other one I'm going to take out a 1 because there really isn't a greatest common factor besides for that. And that leaves me with the 2x minus 3. So my two factors here are 2x plus 1 times 2x minus 3. And again, this is equal to 0. I had my 0 on the left side. I now moved it to my right side. That really should not matter. And using the zero product property, we're going to set every factor equal to 0. So 2x plus 1 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 1 and divide by 2. That gets me negative 1/2. And the next one is 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. I'm going to add 3 and divide by 2. That gives me 3/2. Again, those are not your answers. You need to show me that you got that far, but you need to check it now. So in order to check your answer, use your calculator. And it should be a TI-83 or a TI-84. Those are the calculators for this class. No other calculator you should be using. So I'm going to plug in negative 1/2 into the original equation. So I'm going to go ahead to the original equation and type in square root 4 times negative 1/2 plus 3. And it's supposed to equal 2x. So 2 times negative 1/2. The negative 1/2 gets plugged into both spots. And I want to see, does the left side equal the right side? So I'm going to go ahead and use my calculator. I'm typing it in. This is all under the square root sign. My left side is a 1. And my right side, when I plug in 2 times negative 1/2, I get a negative 1. Those are not equal, which means this is not a solution. So I should see a cross out. So I should still be able to see that it said negative 1/2, but that you cross it off because that is what we call an extraneous solution. You should know what that word means, extraneous solution, an extra solution that does not actually work. So you should have the work to show how to get it, but that it actually is not an answer. You still need to check the other side because as you saw in the last example, we had no solution. So let's check 3/2. So we're going to plug in 3/2 on the left side, and we're going to plug 3/2 in on the right side. So square root 4 times 3/2 plus 3. That gets me to be a 3. On the right side, 2 times 3/2. That gets me to be a 3. So that one does in fact work. I'm going to box it. X is 3/2 is the only solution. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and I will see you in class.